Hello and welcome to Court Watch with Jason Kotowski. I'm Jose Franco. On this program, this is where 17 News Courts and Crimes reporter Jason Kotowski and I will discuss the cases making their way through the criminal court system here in Kern County and the ones that have caught your attention on KGT.com. Right now, we'll bring in Jason Kotowski, who is that very crime reporter. Jason, there's lots on your calendar as always, sure. And we're going to take some time here to go over some of the things that caught our interest and caught our audience's interest. But let's go over some of these cases now. One of the major things that we've covered this week, or actually you covered it this week, you were in court, you followed this case for a long time, is the Susan Clevenger case. Now, this is a case that's been winding through the court system for a long time, a case that started in 2000, I should say.
That's right.
So a quarter century at this point. Jason, can you tell us about what's the ins and outs of this case, what happened, just to give our audience a recap of what went on here?
Absolutely. 25 years ago, Bradley St. Clair, a property manager with St. Clair Investments, he was third generation co-owner of the company along with his brother. He was found killed in his office. Now what happened is that his secretary by the name of Susan Clevenger, she'd started working there, and over the course of 18 months saw how much money was coming in, saw the number of people that came and went and at what times they came and went, got to know Bradley St. Clair's office hours very well, got to know his schedule, and she came up with a plot. She told her boyfriend by the name of Keith Brian Shell, she said, listen, if we kidnap him, we can hold him for ransom. We'll get, let's say, $1 million ransom. We'll be fine after this. She wanted some of that money that the St. Clairs had. So they come up with this plan, and on one day in 2000, she checks his Bradley St. Clair's calendar, makes sure that he's going to be alone in the early evening, and she lets her boyfriend in through a back door of the property. The boyfriend surprises St. Clair, there's a struggle, and during the struggle, St. Clair is strangled with his necktie. He's bound with duct tape and then strangled. Now, the duct tape is tested for fingerprints, it comes back to Shell. Other people come forward and say, yes, Susan Clevenger's been talking about this for a while, trying to get other people interested. So quickly they identify the suspects, take them into custody. Both of them are found guilty of murder, kidnapping for ransom, and other charges. Both are sentenced to life without parole, and that was, I want to say that was in 2001 or 2002 that they were convicted and sentenced. So years go by, the St. Clair family believes this is behind them now. They're mourning the loss of Bradley St. Clair was the father of a young son, and his wife was pregnant at the time with a daughter when he was killed. So his wife's in mourning, his children, his mother, Arlana Clevenger, who was at the hearing this week, is still around. She's 85 now. So the family is devastated by this, but they think that at least the court cases are done with. Well, in 2019, California state law changes, and what happens is it's a change to the what's called the felony murder rule. Previously, someone could be charged with felony murder if they took part in a serious crime such as robbery or kidnapping or burglary, and someone died as a result, even if they weren't the actual killer.
Do the actual act of the death of somebody.
Exactly. You could still, just because you were there and you took part in what they call the underlying felony, if you took part in the robbery and someone else shoots somebody during that robbery, you can still be charged with murder. And so what happened was the law changed in 2019 to say only if you were a major or active participant in the killing itself can you be charged with felony murder. So what happens is thousands of cases are now coming back, probably tens of thousands across the state are coming back, and people are being resentenced. Some of them, the judge is still finding that there's a major active participant and they're getting the same sentence. Some are being sentenced to the underlying felony and getting a much lower sentence.
And this is related to what's happening in Southern California with the Menendez case, isn't it? Isn't it related to that, or is it kind of not the exact same thing?
Not the exact same thing. And that one, they're both direct killers in that one. They're both perpetrators in that one. But we have had a number of cases come back in Kern County for this. Susan Clevenger, by far, is not the only one, but her case was heard a few years ago, and Judge Michael Bush, he looked at it, he dismissed the murder charge against her, but the kidnapping for ransom, he resentenced her to life without parole because of that charge.
Yeah, and I was just wondering for people at home, like this was, wasn't not part of the investigation, but just as you describe it, seems open and shut. They were the only suspects in this, and so they were arrested pretty quickly. at the time?
They were arrested pretty quickly. It's funny you mentioned that they were the only suspects. There is the possibility of a third person being involved.
That's right, I did read about that.
And there's a $75,000 reward leading to the arrest of a third person. And part of the reason for this is Bradley St. Clair was young, he was tall, he was over 6 feet tall, he was strong, and his mother is convinced, and so are some others, that there's no way that Keith Schell on his own could have restrained him. You know, Bradley St. Clair would have put up enough of a fight. They believe that it took 2 men at least to restrain him. So there is the possibility of a third person.
Right. Okay. And then, I was just wondering too, and I was going over this case, reading your work on KGT. There was a couple of delays in the resentencing recently. I think one of the stories you mentioned that it was 8 times that resentencing has been delayed. What went into that in this particular case here?
Yes. What happened was she was resentenced, I want to say in 2021. And again, everyone thinks it's done, but it was early on in the whole resentencing process with the change to the felony murder rule, and the judge admitted, and I'm sure this has happened with other judges who have heard these cases, he did not know at the time that he could resentence her on every charge. He believed it was only the murder charge. So Clevenger files another appeal and says, I want to be resentenced on all charges, and in the hopes that she'll get 25 to life on kidnapping for ransom instead of life without parole. That 25 to life, if she was granted that, she's already served enough time that she could be up for parole, potentially released. So it has to come back again. So that's the first reason. And she's gone through at least a couple different attorneys since then. One attorney who had her case for, I believe it was a couple years, has since retired. And so then they had to assign it to another attorney. So there were multiple postponements. And I believe you're right. It was something like 8 or 9 different postponements until we got to this past week. I think it was this Tuesday where the resentencing was held. And the judge examined all the evidence. There were some comments by the prosecutor who said, this murder never happens without Susan Clevenger. Susan Clevenger was the brains behind this, and she knew when Bradley St. Clair would be alone. She let her boyfriend in. She was the one who had the timing down to commit this crime. If she's not involved, this never happens. Yeah. So she says she deserves to serve life without parole. Her defense attorney says, she's been a model prisoner. Yes, this was a horrific incident, but she's only had one write-up over the time she's been in prison, and that was for having her hair a little too long. And other than that, she said she's a model prisoner. She deserves a chance at freedom. The judge looked at this, and he also heard from St. Clair family members. Arlana St. Clair, Bradley St. Clair's mother, Bradley St. Clair's wife, one of his children was there, the son who's now an adult and has kids of his own. They all spoke about what this did to their family. And the judge said that she was very much a part of this, and because of her role in this, she still deserves to serve life without parole.
I think we read something, and the judge said Susan Clevenger is 100% responsible in this?
Yes. He said absolutely. He said you were a major participant, and basically kind of echoed the prosecutor's statements, is that this murder never happens without your involvement.
And then finally, this one last point here. I think people, or one point that I was, frankly, a little confused on when I asked you to clarify it, that she was originally sentenced life without parole and then resentenced again life without parole?
That's correct.
The mechanism, how does that
Yes.
How does that happen?
What they do is they have to bring them back there. You can't just send, it's not as simple as Judge Bush emailing the appeals court and saying, I'm still going to resentence her life without parole. No, they have to bring her back, and there has to be a hearing, and the judge, again, has to hear from both sides as to why she should or should not, why her sentence should change or why it should not, why it should remain in place. And so, but you can resentence someone, and again, this has happened many times in Kern County too, you can resentence someone to the same sentence on these types of appeals. You can say, I've taken into consideration everything that else has been brought forward since the original sentencing, and I still think that life without parole is the proper punishment for this case.
And that's it for this case, right? That's for now.
The judge said, for now, absolutely, but he did tell the St. Clair family that years ago he was told as a judge that someone convicted of murder that someday they'd be released from prison. That's going to happen eventually, and he thought that that'll never happen. If you're convicted of murder, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. And we've seen that that's not the case. You do have convicted murderers because of changes in the law. Sometimes penalties are reduced and people are released. So he did caution them is that she may get out one day. As of right now, she's still serving life without parole. But who's to say another 5 years down the line, there's not another change in the law that could reduce that for her. But as of now, you're correct. The case is done as of now.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's move on to another case that you covered this week. Another case, another bit of conclusion, similar to this, where a woman, Gabriela Martinez, was sentenced to 14 years in prison for the shooting death of a boyfriend. This is out in Rosemead. Can you tell us about this case, Gabriela Martinez shooting death outside a motel?
Yes. This took place November 9th, 2022. It was outside a motel in Rosemead. And what happens? Police are called out there. They find a body, in a field, or a dirt lot near the motel. They start investigating. They talk with motel staff. Turns out that guy had been staying there along with his girlfriend, later identified as Martinez. Hotel staff say that they saw them the night before. They were arguing. The woman seemed to be acting pretty abusively towards him. They go outside to the front of the motel, and Martinez, and there's surveillance video of this. Martinez and the boyfriend, whose name is Kevin Ramirez, they're arguing to the front of the hotel, and you can see that she has a gun in her hand. Now, she's kind of waving the gun around, and she's clearly, she's very animated, clearly upset. They continue arguing. They walk away from the motel. They go down the street, and they're walking kind of back and forth in this field. And it's my understanding, I have not seen the images itself, but the description in the court documents is that you can see two figures kind of walking back and forth there. It's getting darker now. And at one point, you see kind of a burst of light. And that was identified to be a muzzle flash. That was identified to be the moment that a gun was shot. One person is seen leaving that field, and that's it. In the field the next day is found the body of Kevin Ramirez. He's shot, and Martinez is nowhere to be found. So a few days go by. I forget the exact date when she was arrested, but she was arrested in another city, and at first she gave a couple of different stories. One of them being that her boyfriend, that Ramirez, was abusive towards her, and she shot him while in fear for her life. Later on, she changes that to say that she had the gun, but that he reached for the gun and it accidentally went off. And she said that he was going to shoot himself. And so, but she was trying to keep the gun from him. He was grabbing it from her, and the gun accidentally went off and killed him. So she gave a couple different versions of this. Ultimately, though, she accepted a plea deal. She pled no contest to voluntary manslaughter in exchange for 14 years in prison. And then that's what she was sentenced to this week.
Right, and I just wanted to ask about that. You mentioned that this was pleaded down to voluntary manslaughter. How often does that happen here? This sounded like a complicated case that sometimes we do get across here in KGT of domestic violence, possible domestic violence issues involved in a relationship like this. Violence ends up happening. One person dies in it. Sometimes there's arguments, disputes over what went on. We write, or you and I, you mainly, sure. You write stories about these kinds of investigation getting sent back for more investigation. But how does this happen in this case where, or how often does it happen where a charge like a murder turns into manslaughter? Was there convincing arguments what leads a prosecutor to decide that?
Now, see, we're not privy to all the negotiating that goes on behind the scenes, but I can say in general, juries have, and I've been told this basically by every attorney, juries have a harder time convicting a woman of murder than a man. It's a natural thing, and that's just the case. That's just the case, and especially would have a harder time in the case of where there's allegations of abuse. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to be clear. I don't know if Kevin Ramirez ever laid a hand on her or not, but that's what she said. And there's the possibility that she gets up on the stand and starts talking about all this abuse she suffered from him. She's a battered woman, and she couldn't take anymore, and she thought she was, like she said, told the police that I thought he was going to kill me. I was in fear of my life. And a jury may say, well, you know what? She acted. It may not have been the best course of action, but she was in fear for her life. We're not going to find her guilty of murder. So the DA has to weigh that. What's a jury going to think of this? And what's the possibility? She does, in the prosecutor's mind, she still needs to serve some time. We think she committed murder, but what's the jury going to believe? And looking at that, if in this case they negotiated 14 years, the DA's office must have thought that was a reasonable enough amount of time for her to get for this crime. And so they were able to negotiate that, not go through a trial, and not go through the possibility of a jury potentially returning a not guilty verdict.
Right, okay. And then in a case like this, we hear from families who reach out, who send us notes or emails through social media, asking asking for justice in a case like this. Sometimes a victim's family may not feel like justice is served. But Jason, for what you know, how does a district attorney balance that, trying to weigh families, potentially two victims in a case like this?
Right.
How do they do that?
Right. They keep families involved. They do talk with the families. They do let them know what's proceeding, and they let them know what their plans are. But the DA's office has said time and again, we don't make our decisions solely based on what the families want. We have to find justice in this case. And sometimes justice may be a plea deal. Sometimes that may be the best course to take. But once it's done, and I want to bring up too, a judge can always reject a plea deal. A judge may look at it and say, why isn't this going to trial? And I've seen that happen before. A judge, it was a DUI case some years ago where someone was killed, and a judge told the defendant, you only cared about yourself that night. I'm not accepting this plea deal. You're going to trial. They'd already worked something out. The judge asked questions of the attorneys, was a plea deal accepted in this case? They asked the prosecutor, and they said there were some issues with the evidence, and the judge said, no, I'm looking at this. I don't think this is acceptable. He threw out the deal, made him go to trial. In this case, however, though, the judge looked at it. It was brought before him, and the plea deal went forward. And there's no appealing that. Once a plea deal is reached, that's the end of it. The family can't lobby and have it appealed.
Okay.
The defendant accepted this. The prosecutor brought it forward. So at this point, this case is done.
So possibly there's a chance for maybe civil litigation after that?
There could be something like that, yes. But as far as the criminal proceedings go, she's done. She'll be sent to prison within the next, it usually takes sometimes a week or two, and she'll start serving her term.
Great, okay. Well, let's move on to another case here that's been caught the attention of a lot of people here in Kern County, the case of Crystal Aguilar.
Yes.
She was a woman who was accused and seen on video taking down the American flag at Hart Park at the entrance there. The video of that incident shared widely on social media, shared by the sheriff's office. I believe it was the same day after it occurred. She was arrested and charged, and she missed a court date
Yes.
recently. Can you update us on what happened on in this case?
Sure. She was supposed to show up to court. She failed to show up, and a warrant was issued for her arrest. And it's a no bail warrant, meaning that once she's taken into custody, she can't post bail again. A judge could always revisit that and decide to give her another chance. But she'd already posted bail. She made a promise that I will appear for all court hearings, and we don't know her reasoning. I'm not even sure if she contacted her attorney or not, or if they've heard anything from her. All we know is that she failed to show up, and this puts the case in limbo right now. They can't proceed without having her there. So what happens now is there's a warrant issued for her arrest. If authorities do come across her, if they do find her, she'll be taken into custody, booked back into jail, and be kept there until the next hearing.
Okay, and then she was charged at the time with resisting arrest, making threats to a peace officer's vandalism and battery against the peace officer, because I think you found a report that she had allegedly kicked an officer.
That's correct.
during the arrest?
Yes, it was. It's unclear if she actually connected during the arrest. A ranger and I believe it was a deputy both said she attempted to kick them, but then when she was taken to the downtown jail, to Laredo jail, she was sat down and she did kick and connect with a deputy's leg.
Gotcha.
So it's unclear. I don't think there was any major injury, but it still counts as an assault.
And this is, I don't know how unusual this is, but how unusual is it that someone who is supposed to be in court just misses a date that they're supposed to be at? How often does it happen? How often do you see it?
I mean, unfortunately, it happens all the time. It happens every day I'm in the courthouse. There's people who haven't shown up. And sometimes I'm in one courtroom and you have 6 or 7 people that failed to show. This is not unusual by any means. It's extremely common.
And so, but this is a higher profile case given political climate, what's going on across the country and here in Kern County. Does it now with skipping her court date, does she face stronger penalties now because of this?
The biggest impact this will have is that she likely will not get an opportunity to stay out of custody again while the case moves forward. At this point, she's likely going to be kept at jail until the case is over. That's really the strongest penalty. The court may impose a fine. She may be found in contempt of court, but it doesn't add a whole lot. It's a violation. But But the main case is still the major stuff. And this, more than anything else, this just impacts her freedom because she failed to show up. She had the opportunity to remain free while the case made its way through the system. Now, it's very unlikely she's given that opportunity again because she's proven she can't be relied on to show up.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I was going to ask you about from your knowledge, how do prosecutors handle a case like this when it's so politically charged, very public? And it's, from our experience too, I'd say that it's pretty unusual that law enforcement releases a video so quickly after an incident like this that could potentially high profile. How does a DA handle that, do you think, in your experience?
In my experience, they tend to address it like any other case. They don't make. It's not like the DA goes in there and says that, hey, this is a major case, Your Honor. This is something that we have to take very seriously. They treat all cases seriously, and I think it's more on our end and on because of what's going on in the country nationally. This case got a lot of traction. For the DA, it's still. I'm sure it's an interesting case to the prosecutors, but it doesn't mean that it's treated any more or less than any other case that they have. They're still looking for justice in this. They're still going to determine what's the best course of action in this. I don't think it makes any real difference in how they prepare for the case or how it's prosecuted.
Gotcha. Okay. And with that, let's move on to another case that we get. I don't want to say a lot, but when we run into them, they are disturbing.
Sure.
Next, we have a disturbing story of we learn about them. We're reminded that it occurs in Kern County and many other places. It involves a former teacher now who is accused of possessing child sex abuse material, and he was in court this week. Can you tell us about this case involving the former teacher Zachary McGraw?
Yes, Mr. McGraw was in court this week. He was arraigned on charges of possessing that material, that illicit material. What happens in a lot of these cases is police get an alert from I need to get the name right here. It's the cyber tip line from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which receives alerts and it provides information as to when illegal material, child sexual abuse material is downloaded. So police got an alert about that. They looked into it. They traced the IP address to McGraw's residence. Did some investigation, served a search warrant at his home, took his phone, and they found multiple files containing that material on the phone, the illegal material.
Right.
So he was arrested, I believe this was back in December, but was released for more investigation. So police conduct more investigation, which could be a full exam. Sometimes they send phones and other electronic devices off to the FBI I don't know if that was done in this case, to download everything, or they may have just done that in-house, but sometimes that can take a while to get those files, to download them, and to examine everything. Charges were filed earlier this month. He was rearrested, posted bail, and then I believe it was Wednesday, was set as the court date for his arraignment. He showed up with an attorney, not guilty pleas were entered on his behalf, and the judge allowed him to remain free on the bail that was previously posted. So he's going to have another court hearing coming up. But yeah, he's free as of now, and as of now, these are just allegations. He's only had his arraignment. They haven't even had a preliminary hearing or anything else yet. So that case still is a while to go.
He'll get a day in court. And just a reminder, to say it again, McGraw is free on bail, right? He's no longer a teacher at the school in Shafter, and we'll keep up with this case on KGT.com. And finally, there's one story that's gotten a lot of attention from viewers. I wish they say viewers exactly, but readers of KGT.com, where you found an interesting or unique case about a DUI, someone who's arrested for DUI with it seemed like they had too much fun that night.
Yes.
Can you tell us about this case?
Absolutely. It's not the highest blood alcohol concentration I've ever seen, but it's the second highest. It's very close. A woman by the name of Stephanie Maria Taco was arrested on suspicion of DUI, and when she took the breath test, it measured her blood alcohol content as 0.42, 0.42%, which is more than 5 times the legal limit, and anything over 0.40, it's risk of coma or death at that point. I mean, it's highly dangerous once your blood alcohol goes over that level. I've seen a 0.45 once, but that's the only other one I can remember that went above 0.40. So she was arrested with a 0.42% BAC. She has a pending case, also a prior DUI arrest, where her BAC was measured at 0.35, also incredibly high. So she has a court hearing, actually, she had a court hearing this morning, the details of which I still have to find out. but she's been charged with DUI again. She's got the pending case, she's got this case, and those are that's what caught our attention with that one, is that those are among the highest numbers I've ever seen for a drunken driving case.
Right, and it's such an unusual case, and it's one of these signature issues that we cover here on KGT.com 17 News, that it's, there's lots of DUI cases making their way through the system, and it's something that, lots of groups around this area try hard to stop and get them to do it.
Right.
But I wanted to ask you real quickly here, how did you find this case? I mean, it seems just like one of many, but what stood out here?
I don't want to give away exactly, but I'll tell you, we get ideas, or we get tips from a number of sources.
We get tips. We get sources. Yes. People talk to us all the time about here's things that you might want to look into this.
And
not
that
everything,
was one,
not everything we can, but sometimes there's stuff that you can look into.
Yes, absolutely. And as you can imagine, anyone who hears about someone with and as we were talking about, and again, it's an allegation, but someone who reportedly had a BAC that high of 0.40%, people are like, wait, that can't be right? So we get tips. A lot of ideas too come through search warrants, which I check daily at the courthouse. Sometimes it's just seeing someone charged with a certain thing and requesting the documents. Right. And I'm like, oh wait, this is pretty interesting. So there's a variety of ways that we get ideas for stories. But yeah, this one, you're right, it turned out to be a talker simply because of how high that BAC was.
And it's unusual, and of course we'll cover all those kinds of things on KGT, KGT.com, and we look forward to more of your coverage, Jason. And that'll do it for this edition of Court Watch with Jason Kotowski. Jason Kotowski here. For Jason Kotowski, I'm Jose Franco. Be sure to stay up to date with this story and many others on KGT.com. Thank you for watching.